20 poor man, night blackout tricks that make expensive wilderness survival gear look pointless. Here is what nobody talks about. The moment you truly need your survival skills is the exact moment expensive equipment fails. Not because it is broken, because you are too cold, too tired, or too scared to remember how to use it. This video reveals something that prepper channels spend years avoiding. By the end, you will understand why the oldest survival methods were never about gear at all. They were about knowledge that cost nothing and worked every single time. Hit subscribe right now, and then do something for me. Leave a comment telling me about a time when something simple saved your life in the wilderness, or when fancy gear let you down. Real stories. I read every single one. Wait. I need your full attention for a second. What you are about to learn comes from something deeper than YouTube videos or camping blogs. The foundations of this knowledge sit in our complete survival mechanics guide, available in the description and in the pinned comment below. This is a paid resource where the principles, the decision trees, and the patterns behind every trick we cover here are explained in full detail. If you want to understand not just how to do these things, but why they work, that guide is where the real education lives. Let's go back to 2013. A search and rescue team in the Cascade Mountains of Washington State found a lost hiker after 5 days in below freezing conditions. The hiker survived. Not because of a satellite messenger or an emergency beacon. Not because of a thermal sleeping bag rated to -20 degrees. He survived because he remembered something his grandfather told him 30 years earlier about how tree bark holds heat differently than open air. One piece of knowledge, free, priceless. The disconnect is this. We spend enormous money buying insurance in the form of equipment. We believe that if we own the right tools, we will survive. Meanwhile, someone without money, without gadgets, without anything but attention and memory, walks out of the forest alive, while someone carrying $10,000 worth of gear is never found. This is not a judgment. Expensive gear has legitimate uses. The problem is the belief that gear is a substitute for skill, for presence, for understanding how your body works in extreme conditions. A rich person who panics in the dark does not survive. A poor person who knows what panic does to your breathing survives. That is the real secret. Over the next section, we are going to walk through tricks that solve the core survival problems. Not tricks about finding water or building shelter, because those are already documented. These are tricks about the invisible failures, the ones that kill people slowly. The ones that nobody teaches because they require no equipment budget, only clarity. The number one reason people die in wilderness situations has nothing to do with predators or injuries. It is heat loss. Hypothermia does not announce itself. It whispers. And by the time you recognize it, your judgment is already gone. Your expensive emergency radio seems fine. Your GPS still works. Your survival instinct says stay in one place and wait for help. That instinct, at that moment, might be the thing that kills you. A woman named Dorothy from rural Tennessee stayed warm for 3 nights in November without a fire, without a tent, without anything but knowledge about how her body temperature actually works. She did not run. She did not burn calories trying to stay warm through motion. She understood that shivering is your body consuming fuel to make heat, and if you have limited calories, shivering burns them faster than starvation would take them. So she sat still. She wore layers she already had. She reduced her surface area by curling inward. She survived. This trick costs $0. The expensive thermal insulation jacket somebody bought for $300 might keep you alive if you are already making good decisions. But Dorothy's knowledge kept her alive while making the wrong decisions. That is the difference between gear that helps and knowledge that saves. The second invisible killer is not heat, it is panic. And panic kills faster than anything else in the wilderness. A person wearing a $1,000 emergency shelter kit can panic and refuse to use it. A person with zero gear, but the knowledge that panic is a physical response, not a character flaw, can control their breathing and stay alive. One simple fact: panic increases your heart rate. Increased heart rate consumes oxygen. Oxygen depletion makes panic worse. That cycle takes about 4 minutes to become fatal in cold water. But if you know that cycle exists, if you know that your body is doing it mechanically and not because you are actually dying, you can interrupt it. You can breathe slowly on purpose. 4 minutes becomes 40. 40 minutes becomes survival. None of this requires a purchase. It requires paying attention to your own body before you are in crisis. The trick is to practice these things while you are safe and comfortable. That way, when the wilderness turns hostile, your body remembers what to do. Your nervous system has a pattern to follow that is not panic. Number 15 is about fire placement and windbreaks. Most people think building a fire is about having fuel and a spark. That covers maybe half the problem. A fire built in the wrong spot dies fast or consumes twice the wood it should. Position matters more than volume. Find a natural windbreak, a rock face, a thick cluster of evergreens, even a fallen log oriented the right way. Build your fire on the downwind side of that barrier. The wind passes over and around the flames, instead of pushing them sideways or scattering the heat into the open air. A forest ranger from Montana told me she has watched inexperienced campers burn through a week's worth of collected wood in 2 days because they never thought about wind direction. Someone who grew up in rural poverty knew this instinctively. They had to. Wasting fuel meant a cold night. Burning twice as much meant twice as many hours gathering branches. Efficiency was survival, not a luxury. The second part of this trick involves thermal mass around your fire. This is where it gets technical. Before we continue, I need to make sure you are getting the full picture on this one. The mechanics of how primitive heating actually works, the specific angles and materials that amplify warmth without modern equipment, those are the core systems I explain in depth in my complete wilderness heating guide. The ebook is available in the description and in the pinned comment. That guide walks through every principle we are touching here, with diagrams, specific measurements, and tried methods from 3 centuries of documented survival. If you want to understand the why behind each trick, that is where those answers live. But here, we focus on the practical application. Gather stones or clay bricks if they are available near your camp. Arrange them in a partial circle or semi-wall on the sides of your fire, opposite where you will be sitting. These stones absorb heat from the flames. They then re-radiate that warmth back toward you long after the fire burns lower. A small fire with a stone reflector heats like a fire twice its size. The stones hold the temperature steady and direct it where you need it, instead of letting it escape upward into the forest. Families in the Appalachian Mountains used this method for generations. They built fires in clearings with stone walls because it meant burning less wood. And when you are cutting every piece by hand with an axe, burning less is everything. Stone costs nothing except the effort to move it. Number 14 connects back to shelter design. A sleeping shelter in cold conditions does not need to be large. In fact, large is a mistake. You want a space just big enough for your body and your heat source. A small shelter traps body heat. A large one forces you to heat an entire volume of air, which is wasteful. A debris shelter, one made from branches, leaves, bark, and natural materials piled around a frame, can be built in less than 2 hours and will hold warmth like a sleeping bag made of insulation. Your own body generates around 100 watts of heat. In a tiny enclosed space, that becomes significant. A family surviving the Great Depression often built temporary shelters from branches and leaves. They did not have tarps or nylon. They had the forest in their hands. The insulation value of leaves and forest debris is often overlooked. Scientists have measured it. A foot-thick layer of dried leaves provides roughly the same R value as fiberglass insulation of the same thickness. Leaves are free. Fiberglass costs money. During the Texas freeze we mentioned, a woman in her 70s built a small shelter inside her garage using branches and leaves she had saved from fall. She and her 2 dogs stayed warm enough inside that shelter to survive 9 days without power or heat. Her neighbors with modern insulation and modern heating systems were burning through expensive firewood or running generators until the fuel ran dry. She was using what she called the old way. That old way was physics. It still is. Number 13 is about water heating without a container. This one surprises most people. You can heat water to boiling temperature without a metal pot or any container that would normally melt. Dig a small hole in the ground. Line it with clay, or find a natural depression in a rock that can hold liquid. Fill it with water. Then take stones from your fire, rocks heated in the flames until they are hot enough that you cannot hold them, and drop them into the water using a stick or wooden tongs. The stone transfers its heat to the water. You keep adding hot stones until the water boils. This method is documented in archaeological digs going back thousands of years. It is not theoretical, it is proven. Families in the Pacific Northwest cooked fish and made soups this way for centuries before European contact. The knowledge was refined through generations and worked consistently. This technique solves a critical problem for anyone without modern cookware. You can sterilize water without losing a pot to the flames. You can make warm drinks in the middle of winter using materials found literally everywhere in nature. Survival experts with expensive camping equipment sometimes overlook this because they assume heating requires equipment. It does not. Heating requires energy and a medium. Fire provides the energy. Stone transfers it. Water receives it. The container is optional. Before you go collecting stones for this method, understand one critical detail. Not all stone works. River rocks and streambed stone are the safest choice because water has already tested them for thousands of years. Granite, slate, and basalt work reliably. Porous stone, sandstone, or anything that looks like it could absorb water, avoid those completely. The reason is simple physics. Porous stone traps moisture inside its structure. Heat it rapidly, and that trapped water turns to steam. Steam expands. The stone fractures violently, sometimes explosions. In survival situations, you do not need shrapnel. You need hot water. Families who lived through the Depression and the decades before learned this through experience, sometimes painful experience. Trial and error in your own kitchen is acceptable. Trial and error when you are hungry and cold in the wilderness is not. The stone method works because it is reversible, correctable, and requires nothing you cannot find within 50 feet of almost any water source. Now, a crucial moment here. Before we continue deeper into the techniques that separate those who prepared thoughtfully from those who spent their money on gadgets that fail, I need you to understand the complete framework behind this. The survival guide in the description and pinned comment, the full ebook, explains not just the how of these methods, but the why behind each one. Why certain materials work, why timing matters more than equipment, why your ancestors survived what would kill most modern people with full gear. That ebook goes deep into the mechanisms that make these tricks actually work instead of just looking impressive. It is worth your time to grab it, because once you understand the pattern, you will stop buying things you do not need. Number 11 addresses something most preppers get completely wrong: insulation from below. People buy expensive sleeping pads. They spend $300 on a thermal mat filled with advanced foam and reflective material. Meanwhile, an unemployed laborer in the 1930s stayed warmer sleeping on a pile of dry leaves and newspaper than modern campers do in their synthetic bedding. The reason is basic thermodynamics. Your body loses more heat downward into cold ground than it loses upward to cold air. A sleeping bag alone does almost nothing if the ground beneath you is pulling warmth away. Your ancestors understood this instinctively. They would never sleep directly on earth or rock. They built up layers: leaves, grass, pine needles, even crumpled newspaper if they had it. These materials trap air. Trapped air does not conduct heat well. It insulates. A 6-inch layer of dry leaves underneath your body does more for your core temperature than an expensive bag without it. The cost is zero. The time investment is maybe 10 minutes if you are starting from scratch. In winter, before you ever lie down to sleep outdoors, spend that time. Rake leaves into a depression, pack them down, sleep on top. Your body will stay warmer than it would on cold ground, and you will understand something modern gear companies do not want you to know. Comfort and survival are not expensive problems. Number 10 combines two principles we have already discussed, but applies them in a way that transforms your entire shelter strategy. This is where the poor man methods start to compound. You take the insulation knowledge and layer it with structural thinking. The result is what grandparents called a debris shelter. This is not a tent. This is not even really a structure you would build in a planned camp. This is what you build when you need shelter immediately and have nothing but your hands and the forest around you. Find a fallen log or a low branch that can serve as a ridgepole. Lean branches against it in a peaked formation, like a roof frame. Cover this frame with leaves, bark, pine boughs, anything that overlaps and sheds water. Pile leaves inside as deep as your insulation foundation from number 11. Crawl in. The interior space is small, maybe 3 feet high and 4 feet deep. Your body heat concentrates in that small space. The leaves underneath stop ground cold. The leaves and branches on top stop wind. A debris shelter made correctly in an afternoon keeps a person alive through freezing nights that would kill them in the open. Military survival manuals teach this. Wilderness instructors teach this. Yet people still pay for emergency shelters, plastic bivouacs, and lightweight tent systems that require a level ground, proper staking, and conditions that simply do not exist when you actually need emergency shelter. A debris shelter costs nothing. It takes 3 hours to build, maybe 4 if you work alone. It requires no equipment, no battery fails, no strap breaks, no seam splits. You build it from what lies on the ground around you, and when you leave, the forest takes it back. Now I need to tell you something that might sound strange coming at the end of this list. This is the secret I promised you at the beginning. The reason that an 83-year-old woman in a Texas ice storm was warmer than families with $10,000 generators sitting in the same town. The reason that a farm wife from the 1950s could keep food safer than someone with a backup refrigerator battery today. It is not about intelligence. It is not about money or access to products. It is about something simpler and harder. It is about knowing that you can survive with what you have right now. Not someday, not when the equipment arrives, not if you buy the right thing from the right store. Right now, in this moment, with your hands and your surroundings. That old woman knew this because her mother taught her, and her grandmother taught her mother. A farm wife knew this because she had done it already, over and over, in smaller ways, until the larger emergency felt like a familiar conversation. They did not prepare in theory. They prepared by practice, by doing things the slow way, the hard way, on ordinary days when electricity worked fine and the weather was calm. That is the thread that runs through every single one of these 20 tricks. Not one of them requires electricity. Not one of them requires you to own something special. Not one of them is so complicated that you need to read an instruction manual in the dark. They work because they are simple. Because they are old. Because thousands of people have already done them when it mattered, and survived. Your expensive prepper gear assumes a specific kind of emergency. One where the power fails but everything else is still standing. Roads are still passable. Stores still exist, somewhere. You just need to bridge a few days until things turn back on. That assumption worked in Texas in February 2021 for people with money and patience. It did not work for people who were freezing that night, right then, with no days to spare. These tricks do not assume the grid comes back. They assume it does not. They assume you are alone. They assume you have exactly what is available in the moment and nothing more. And they work because they have been proven, tested, refined, and passed down across generations that had no other choice but to make them work. You do not need to buy anything to start. Pick one. Choose the water collection, or the natural refrigeration, or the char cloth. Practice it when you are not desperate. Do it this week. Do it this month. Not as a hobby. Do it as something real. Build a debris shelter on a weekend. Make a friction fire in your backyard. Cook an entire meal on an open flame without any modern equipment. That is the real preparation. Not the gear, not the purchase, the doing, the knowing in your hands and in your muscles and in your memory that you can do this. Because when the actual emergency comes, the difference between you and everyone else will not be the stuff you own. It will be that you have already done it before. I want to thank you for watching this all the way through. If you found yourself thinking about any of these tricks, or if you have used one yourself, leave a comment down below. I read them, and hearing your own stories is what makes this worth doing. Hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new video when it drops. Stay curious, stay ready, and I will see you next time.